It has now been 100 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. A couple of updates. First of all, you guys remember last week, and I was kind of surprised by this, Sergeant Aaron Cross with the Pima County Sheriff's Office told me that he got word from a detective that Nancy's family initially thought she may have walked away from the house, that's what they were told initially.
100 days. Say that number out loud. 100 days since anyone has seen Nancy Guthrie. 100 days since a family woke up to blood on a front doorstep, a Ring camera ripped from the wall, and a silence so loud it has never stopped screaming. 100 days and no arrest. No suspect named publicly. No closure. And yet, somehow, the sheriff looked into a camera and said they are getting closer. Are they? Because the people closest to this investigation are telling a very different story. A story that involves missed evidence, sidelined federal agents, and a first week so chaotic that detectives couldn't even agree on what happened to Nancy in those critical opening hours. This is day 100. And if anything, the questions just got harder. Mother's Day came and went this past weekend. For most families it was flowers, phone calls, maybe a long lunch. For Savannah Guthrie, it was something else entirely. She posted a video, pictures of her mother, memories frozen in time, and wrote words that no child should ever have to write. She called her mother daughter, sister, Nana. And then she said something that stopped people mid-scroll. She wrote that her family misses Nancy with every single breath. That they will never stop looking. That they will never be at peace until they find her.
Hard to believe it's been 100 days. Savannah Guthrie posted a video yesterday with videos and pictures of her mom and wrote, mother, daughter, sister, Noni, we miss you with every breath. We will never stop looking for you. We will never be at peace until we find you. We need help. Someone knows something that can make the difference. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can be anonymous. And the reward remains available. Please keep praying. Bring her home.
She asked anyone watching, anyone who knows anything at all, to call 1-800-CALL-FBI. She reminded them the reward is still available. And then she asked people to keep praying. Bring her home. Those two words. That is what day 100 looks like for that family. Hi viewers, here is a question and the answer will be seen in the comments below. Do you think the Pima County Sheriff's Office should hand this investigation fully over to the FBI right now, yes or no? Now here is where things start to unravel in a way that should concern everyone following this case. Last week, Sergeant Aaron Cross with the Pima County Sheriff's Office, who also serves as the union president, came forward with information he said came directly from detectives working the case. He said that when Nancy first went missing, her own family believed she had walked away from the home on her own. That stopped a lot of people cold. Because it directly contradicted everything Savannah Guthrie had said publicly.
She was in tremendous pain. Her back was very bad. You know, she was trying to, on a good day, she could walk down to the mailbox and get the mail, but most days not. So there was no wander off. And the doors were propped open.
Yeah.
And there was blood on the front doorstep. And the Ring camera had been yanked off.
Yeah.
And so we were saying, this is...
Yeah. Do something.
This is not okay.
Yeah.
This isn't... Something is very wrong.
It contradicted the physical evidence at the scene. It contradicted what sources close to the investigation had been quietly saying for weeks. And it contradicted the gut of anyone who had paid even passing attention to this case. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. Her back was in such bad condition that on a good day, she could walk to the mailbox and back. Most days she could not even do that. The idea that she simply wandered away from her home was never believable to the people who knew her and loved her. And yet that was the information being passed around in the opening hours. Then the weekend arrived. And Sergeant Cross picked up the phone. He called back with a correction. What the detectives actually meant, he explained, was not that the family thought Nancy walked away on her own 2 feet. What they meant was that the family thought she may have called for help herself. Maybe an ambulance. Maybe someone she trusted. That she may have left the home through her own choice but not under her own power. That is a significant difference.
Over the weekend, I heard from Sergeant Cross, who says that he followed up with the detectives, and he says what they actually meant is that Nancy's family thought she may have had someone take her away on her own. And I asked exactly what that meant, and he said they did not think that she actually walked away on her own, but instead thought maybe she had some kind of medical issue and called an ambulance on her own.
But here is the part that should keep anyone watching this up at night. The fact that this correction had to be made at all, the fact that the information coming out of that department in the very first hours was this muddled and this confused, points to something much larger than a miscommunication. It points to what sources close to this investigation have been describing as a first week so disorganized, so structurally broken, that detectives were not even communicating clearly with each other, let alone with outside agencies standing by and ready to help. 1 week. Gone. And somewhere out there, someone knows exactly where Nancy Guthrie is. The blood on that front doorstep did not put itself there. The Ring camera did not rip itself off the wall. Those doors did not open on their own. This was not a medical episode. This was not a quiet disappearance. Whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie happened fast, happened violently, and happened in a way that someone went to significant lengths to plan. And right now, 100 days later, the people tasked with finding her are still correcting their own statements from the week before. So when Sheriff Chris Nano stepped outside, got stopped by a reporter, was asked directly on camera whether they were any closer to solving this case, and responded simply, "We are," before climbing into his Corvette and driving away, it raised a question that cannot be ignored. Closer than what? Because what is coming next in this story, the evidence that may or may not exist, the federal agents who were never fully let in, the border that sits 45 minutes from Nancy's front door, and the statement made by the director of the FBI that a retired agent with decades of experience called completely unprecedented. All of it points to a case that may be in far worse shape than anyone in that sheriff's office is willing to admit out loud. 100 days. And the clock has never stopped running. But here is the part that should keep anyone watching this up at night. The fact that this correction had to be made at all, the fact that the information coming out of that department in the very first hours was this muddled and this confused, points to something much larger than a miscommunication. It points to what sources close to this investigation have been describing as a first week so disorganized, so structurally broken, that detectives were not even communicating clearly with each other, let alone with outside agencies standing by and ready to help. 1 week. Gone. And somewhere out there, someone knows exactly where Nancy Guthrie is. The blood on that front doorstep did not put itself there. The Ring camera did not rip itself off the wall. Those doors did not open on their own. This was not a medical episode. This was not a quiet disappearance. Whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie happened fast, happened violently, and happened in a way that someone went to significant lengths to plan. And right now, 100 days later, the people tasked with finding her are still correcting their own statements from the week before. So when Sheriff Chris Nano stepped outside, got stopped by a reporter, was asked directly on camera whether they were any closer to solving this case, and responded simply, "We are," before climbing into his Corvette and driving away, it raised a question that cannot be ignored. Closer than what? Because what is coming next in this story, the evidence that may or may not exist, the federal agents who were never fully let in, the border that sits 45 minutes from Nancy's front door, and the statement made by the director of the FBI that a retired agent with decades of experience called completely unprecedented. All of it points to a case that may be in far worse shape than anyone in that sheriff's office is willing to admit out loud. 100 days. And the clock has never stopped running. To understand how deeply the first week failed Nancy Guthrie, you have to go back to the very beginning. Not to the day she disappeared, but to the hours immediately after. Because that is where the damage started. And according to sources close to this investigation, that is where it may never fully be undone.
President. He told me on the show that he had new information from detectives that Nancy's family first believed that she was a walkaway. And if you look back at that episode, you can tell that it surprised me because it contradicted what Savannah Guthrie said in her interview and what I've heard all along, which was that the family did not think it was a walkaway and that they were frustrated.
When a person goes missing, the first 24 hours are not just important. They are everything. Investigators, forensic specialists, and retired federal agents will tell you the same thing without hesitation. The trail is warmest in those first hours. Evidence is freshest. Witnesses remember more. The window to intercept, to track, to catch is open widest right then. And then, hour by hour, that window begins to close. In Nancy Guthrie's case, that window may have been left open to the wrong theory entirely. Sergeant Aaron Cross, in correcting what he said the week prior, confirmed something that a silhouetted source had already described weeks earlier. In those first critical hours, detectives on the ground were operating under the assumption that Nancy may have walked away from her home. Not that she was taken. Not that something had been done to her. That she left. Think about what that means operationally. If you believe someone walked away, you search locally. You check hospitals, shelters, nearby streets. You do not immediately mobilize a full missing persons response. You do not treat the home as a crime scene with the urgency it deserves. You do not start looking at vehicles, at border crossings, at surveillance footage from cameras 45 minutes south. You wait. You watch. You assume she will turn up. And that waiting, according to insiders, is exactly what happened. Now Sergeant Cross has clarified that what detectives meant was that the family believed Nancy may have called for help herself, perhaps an ambulance, perhaps someone she trusted, and left voluntarily but not independently. That distinction matters. But here is what matters even more. The confusion existed at all. Inside the department. In the first hours of one of the highest profile missing persons cases in the country. That is not a footnote. That is the story. Savannah Guthrie had already made it plain. In her own words, her mother was in tremendous pain. Her back was so deteriorated that walking to the mailbox and back was considered a good day. Most days that was not even possible. The doors of the home were found open. There was blood on the front doorstep. The Ring camera had been physically pulled from the wall. These are not the conditions of a voluntary departure. These are the conditions of something gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. And yet the first week was described, by someone inside the department, as chaotic. Not just slow. Not just disorganized. Chaotic. That word carries weight. It means the structure was not just strained, it was absent. It means people were moving without clear direction, processing information without clear channels, making decisions without a unified command. And in a case where every hour counted, chaos was the one thing no one could afford. Sources close to the investigation have said plainly that detectives were not communicating clearly with each other during that first week. Not with outside agencies. Not even internally. Information was fragmented. Direction was unclear. And somewhere in that fog, the first hours of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance slipped by without the full force of what was available ever being deployed. Which brings everything to the evidence. Or more precisely, to what may be missing from it. The doormat on the front step, the one with blood on it, was reportedly still sitting in place long after investigators had come and gone. The door handles, the doors themselves, the tiles near the entrance where the blood trail ended, none of it was taken. Retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell, who has worked evidence collection at the highest level for decades, was direct about what she would have done. She said she would have taken a saw to that door. She said she would have taken the mat, the handles, the floor tiles, everything that could carry a trace of what happened that night. None of that happened. What is publicly known about the physical evidence collected from Nancy Guthrie's home amounts to this. A set of fingerprints. and one hair, collected without its root, which means standard DNA profiling is not possible from it alone.
So he says what he said initially was not correct, and again that Nancy's family did not think that she walked off, but instead that she may have left on her own and left in like an ambulance or something like that. And that lines up with what Savannah Guthrie said in her interview with Hoda, which makes a lot more sense. Take a look. Let me just remind you what Savannah herself said.
Mitochondrial DNA testing may still yield something, tracing the maternal line, but it is a longer, more complicated road. One hair. For a case that has been called one of the most important missing persons investigations in the country. Maureen O'Connell said she refuses to believe that is all they have. She said someone is going to have to prove that to her before she accepts it. And she is right to push back. There is much that has not been made public. There may be evidence that investigators are holding close for reasons that make strategic sense. But the possibility that the chaotic first week affected what was collected and how it was collected cannot be dismissed. Then Sheriff Chris Nano stepped outside and told the world they're getting closer. He said it simply, directly, with the confidence of someone who either knows something the public does not, or someone who has mastered the art of saying very little while appearing to say a great deal. A reporter caught him outside, asked the question plainly, and he answered in 2 words before getting into his Corvette and driving away. We are. Closer to what, exactly, remains the question no one has answered. Because sources who are actually embedded in the details of this case are not describing a department closing in on anything. They are describing an investigation still working through thousands of tips, still sorting through leads, still without a single named suspect or a single thread that feels like it is about to pull everything together. That does not mean the work is not happening. It does not mean the detectives are not putting in the hours. But it does mean that the sheriff's 2-word answer and the reality on the ground are not telling the same story. And then there is the border. 45 minutes. That is the distance between Nancy Guthrie's home in Tucson and the Nogales crossing into Mexico. 45 minutes by car. Less if you are moving with urgency and purpose. And according to retired Lieutenant Dave Smith of the Arizona Department of Public Safety, someone who knows that area and that terrain with the depth of years, the Mexico angle in this case has never been properly reckoned with. His theory is pointed and specific. He suggested that if Mexico was seriously considered as a destination for whoever took Nancy, or for Nancy herself, that would transform this case from a local matter into a federal one. It would bring in agencies, resources, and jurisdictions that extend far beyond Pima County. And the best way, the most effective way, to prevent that from happening would be to deny the possibility of international involvement from the very beginning. Dismiss Mexico early. Keep the case local. Keep control. When those words are placed alongside everything else known about how Sheriff Nanos has handled this investigation, they land differently than they might otherwise. Because the facts of the Nogales crossing are not in dispute. When you drive into Mexico from that point, no one stops you. No one asks questions. No one checks what is in your vehicle. You drive through and you are gone. Coming back into the United States is an entirely different experience, with checkpoints and documentation and scrutiny. But going in? The crossing is open. Cameras exist. But without a vehicle description, without a suspect, those cameras are looking for a needle in a river of steel, hundreds of cars moving through every few hours. The FBI, according to retired Agent Maureen O'Connell, was already quietly working the Mexico angle on their own. They had reportedly reached out through the appropriate federal channels, querying border camera systems, running inquiries through international contacts. They were doing what they could from the outside because they were never fully let inside. And that is the part of this story that sits heaviest. Hundreds of FBI agents. Ready. Staged. Waiting in hotel rooms while the first week dissolved into confusion. Sergeant Aaron Cross has now said directly what many inside the department had been reluctant to say out loud. He believes the sheriff should have handed this investigation to the FBI. Not assisted them. Not partnered with them. handed it over entirely. His reasoning is straightforward. The resources were there. The manpower was there. The expertise was there. And the Pima County Sheriff's Office, for all the dedication of its individual deputies and detectives, did not have what the FBI had waiting and ready to deploy. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly that his agency had hundreds of agents prepared to move on this case. Hundreds. And they Saturday. Maureen O'Connell has worked alongside the FBI's evidence response teams. She has watched them arrive at a scene that was nothing, an open field, a vacant lot, and within hours transform it into a fully operational command post. Vehicles rolling in, cables being laid, computers coming online, specialists from every relevant discipline working in coordinated formation. She described it as something close to watching a military unit build a functional airstrip in the middle of nowhere in less than a day. Precise. Fast. Total. None of that came to Nancy Guthrie's street. And the reason, according to multiple people who know Sheriff Chris Nanos and his history, traces back further than this case. In videos from 2016, Nanos was captured on record expressing deep contempt for the FBI. Not a passing frustration. Not an old professional rivalry. Contempt. Those videos exist. That history exists. And when you place that history next to a decision to keep hundreds of waiting federal agents sidelined during the most critical window of a missing elderly woman's case, the picture that forms is not flattering. Maureen O'Connell was careful and precise in how she framed it. She has been in rooms where egos clashed, where jurisdictions competed, where agencies that did not like each other were forced to sit at the same table. She said that in every one of those situations, the trained professionals found a way to build a bridge, leave personal history at the door, and do the work. She said you negotiate. You offer to handle one piece. You funnel your findings to the lead agency in clean, usable form. You make yourself useful and you make yourself easy to work with, because that is what the situation demands. That did not happen here. And then Kash Patel went on national television. Maureen O'Connell said she has watched FBI directors navigate some of the most politically and legally complicated situations in modern law enforcement history. She referenced Waco. She referenced cases where the Bureau absorbed blame that belonged to other agencies and said nothing publicly. She said she has never, in all of that, seen a sitting director speak the way Patel spoke about this case. Never. And that single word from someone with her experience carries more weight than almost anything else in this story. Because it tells you that what is happening here is not normal. The public posture of the FBI director is not what it looks like when a case is progressing cleanly toward resolution. It looks like one of two things. Either the investigation is in far worse shape than anyone has admitted publicly, or the director is getting ahead of an outcome that is not going to be good, and he is making sure the record reflects where the failure actually originated. Neither possibility is reassuring. There is still a chance. It is worth saying clearly. DNA from a rootless hair is not useless. Mitochondrial testing traces the maternal line and can still produce a meaningful result. A single tip, one person who saw something, one person who heard something, one person who has been carrying information they have not yet shared, can crack a case open in an instant. Investigations that looked cold have broken wide open on less. That possibility is real and it is alive. But it requires someone to come forward. And it requires, at this point, an honest accounting of whether the structure currently in place is the right one to bring Nancy home. Which is why what happens Tuesday matters more than it might appear on the surface. The Pima County Board of Supervisors is set to meet again. And on the agenda, once more, is the question of Sheriff Chris Nanos. Several members of the board have raised the possibility of removal. It is not a simple process. Nanos is an elected official. That carries legal weight and procedural protection. But there is a specific statute in Arizona's constitution that is now being examined closely, one that relates to the timeliness of Nanos's responses to formal inquiries from the board. There are also unresolved questions about his professional history, specifically allegations that he was not truthful about disciplinary suspensions during his prior employment with the El Paso Police Department. That meeting is coming. And what happens inside that room could shift the legal and operational landscape of this entire investigation. If Nanos is removed, or even formally censured, the question of FBI involvement reopens with new urgency. The resistance that has defined the last 100 days could dissolve. The agents who were staged and sidelined could finally be brought in to do the comprehensive work that Maureen O'Connell described. The full evidence response that never happened in that first week could still happen now. It would be late, but it would be something. 100 days. Nancy Guthrie's family has not stopped. Savannah has not gone quiet. She posted that video on Mother's Day and asked the world to keep praying. She reminded everyone that the reward is still available. She reminded everyone that anonymity is protected when you call 1-800-CALL-FBI. She stood in front of a world that was celebrating mothers and said simply, "Bring her home." There is a woman out there somewhere. An 84-year-old grandmother. A mother. A nana. And someone, right now, knows something that could end this. The board meeting is Tuesday. The FBI is watching. The case is at a crossroads that it has been approaching for weeks. And there is new information developing around the investigation's internal structure, the chain of command, and a specific detail about the first night that has not yet been fully addressed publicly. That detail is coming. And when it does, it will reframe everything that happened in those first 72 hours in a way that changes how this entire case looks from the beginning. Do not miss the next one.